Sweet home Alabama, a land of quiet lakes and fields of cotton. It's easy to be fooled by this southern state's timeless rhythms. But without Alabama, the history of America could have taken a very different turn. It was here, on an Alabama bus, that a young seamstress took a brave stand and helped pave the way to great civil rights victories. And it was here when NASA scientists invented the rocket that first propelled humans to the moon. It's a state that's known great transformation. In Alabama, raging tornadoes devastate entire towns, and humans regenerate the land with fire. Aerial Alabama explores the mysteries of a prehistoric settlement, soars across a magic city of industry known for its god of fire and forge, and discovers how a new designer steel plant is launching America into the future. From a small fishing port that's made Hollywood history to a coastal powerhouse that's the birthplace of Mardi Gras in America, and one of baseball's greatest legends, Hammer and Hank. It's all right here in home, sweet home, Alabama. Each fall, thousands of acres of Alabama farmland look as if they've been dusted in snow. This is Alabama cotton. Farmers plant more than 500,000 acres of it every year and then pray for a good fall harvest. Nothing has played a bigger role in the state's history than its king cotton. Once this bounty was picked by hand by enslaved Africans. Today, a single harvester does that work with remarkable speed. The raw cotton is gathered so it can be compressed into giant bales. Each one contains enough cotton for more than 200 pairs of jeans. Bales from across northern Alabama make their way here to a facility outside the town of Cortland. Before cotton can be put to use, it has to be separated from its seeds. That painstaking job was also done by hand until Eli Whitney patented the cotton gin in 1794. The first gins were hand-cranked. Today, they're small factories that run on the grid. Outside, cotton seeds are piled high. They'll be used for replanting and to make cooking oil. The cotton gin revolutionized cotton production in the late 18th century. And Alabama's farmers still rely on it today to turn their white fields into gold. Every year, farmers here grow more than 100,000 tons of cotton. In days of old, steamships and barges carried the bounty down the state's vast network of rivers. There are more navigable waterways in Alabama than in any other state. It was one of these that inspired the southern band Alabama to write their first #1 hit, Tennessee River. The song's lyrics are a celebration of Alabama's rich blend of water, trees, and hills. I was born across the river, in the mountains where I call home. Lord, times were good there. Don't know why I ever roamed. The story of how Alabama became a state can be found, like much else here, on a bend in a river. A stream of mist lingers in the morning sun, a few hundred feet above the Tallapoosa River. Well hidden in the trees below is the site of a gripping tale, A tale of how the U.S. government came to own 23 million acres of land, much of which became the state of Alabama. These lakes and trees were once the land of the Creek and the Cherokee. But in the early 19th century, war broke out between factions of the Creek. War that became a threat to the U.S. government and European American settlers in the South, more and more of whom were moving onto Creek land. So in 1814, General Andrew Jackson and his Army of the Tennessee journeyed south to deal with the Creek threat. This bend in the Tallapoosa River would become the site of their famous and bloody siege. On March 27th, 1,000 Red Stick warriors, members of the Creek tribe, hunkered down behind a barricade here at Horseshoe Bend, ready to defend their land against Jackson and his 2,700 Tennessee soldiers. On Jackson's side were also hundreds of Creek and Cherokee allies. Jackson's men fired cannon at the barricade, but it held. So his Creek allies swam the river, stole canoes, and used them to ferry members of the Tennessee militia onto the bend. The Creek settlement was set ablaze. Here, at the toe of the peninsula, hundreds of women and children had gathered to seek protection. Jackson's men took close to 250 of them hostage, and then the slaughter began. Nearly 600 Creek warriors were killed. Hundreds more were shot or drowned as they tried to escape across the river. Less than 50 of Jackson's men died in the siege, and nearly half of those were Native American allies. One of Jackson's young militia fighters later wrote, "There was nothing to be seen but volumes of dense smoke rising heavily over the corpses of painted warriors and the burning ruins of their fortification." After the siege at Horseshoe Bend, Jackson was promoted to Major General of the U.S. Army. In August 1814, he ordered the remaining Creek chiefs to assemble and forced them to give up 23 million acres of their land. That treaty was signed at Fort Jackson, close to a site that remains sacred to the Creek today. On this morning, the remains of the original fort lie hidden beneath the mist. When it was first built, it may have looked much like this one, the reconstructed Fort Toulouse, which stands just a few hundred feet away. Before the ink on the Treaty of Fort Jackson had even dried, cotton fever was spreading across the region. Thousands of new settlers poured in from neighboring states, hoping to get a piece of America's new fertile land. In a letter to a friend, one North Carolina resident wrote, "The Alabama fever rages here with great violence and has carried off vast numbers of our citizens. Some of our oldest and most wealthy men are offering their possessions for sale and are desirous of removing to the new country." That new country was the state of Alabama. In 1819, just 5 years after the Treaty of Fort Jackson was signed, Alabama was given U.S. statehood. That same year, this city, Montgomery, was established on the banks of the Alabama River. Today, it's the second most populated city in the state and is home to the Alabama State House. But Montgomery only became the capital in 1846, 27 years after Alabama was born. The state's first capital couldn't be more different today. It's known as one of Alabama's most haunted towns. To find it requires a trip south, down the Alabama River. Even from the air, it can be easy to miss the former capital, called Cahaba. That's because this is almost all that's left of it. The old town square, and a few old houses hidden in the trees. This was once a bustling port, a hub of Alabama's booming cotton trade. But frequent floodwaters in Cahaba ultimately caused Alabama's legislature to seek higher ground for its capital city. In 1826, the Alabama capital was moved to Tuscaloosa, a Choctaw Indian name that means black warrior. It was on a bend in the Black Warrior River that the city was founded in 1819. Floods brought down Alabama's first capital city, and its second has also been no stranger to natural disaster. On one April afternoon in 2011, the wind here began to howl. And then a giant tornado headed right for downtown. The devastation is easy to spot from the air. This railway bridge was torn off its foundations. Before April 27th, the Hurricane Creek Bridge was the oldest and tallest hand-riveted railroad trestle in the South. After the tornado ripped it to shreds, people a mile away found railroad ties in their yards and railroad spikes driven into their property like giant nails. As the twister raced through the city, the Graceland apartment complex took a direct hit. In the debris, rescue workers here found the Purple Heart medal of a World War II vet. Former residents salvage what they can. The University of Alabama lies right next to the tornado's path. The twister spared the main campus, but tore right through a block of apartments nearby that housed students. A dirt lot is all that remains today. By the time the twister raced out of Tuscaloosa, much of the city was completely flattened. 43 people here died, including 6 University of Alabama students. After the storm, the university closed its doors for the rest of the school year. When many picture giant twisters tearing across the land, they think Tornado Alley, which stretches north from Oklahoma into Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa. But now, researchers are discovering that an even more dangerous area of tornado activity crosses right through the South, from northern Louisiana east to Alabama. They call this tornado belt Dixie Alley. In Dixie Alley, the most powerful tornadoes tend to touch down for longer. And because Alabama and other southern states are more densely populated than the Great Plains, tornado damage here is even greater. Damage like that in the Alabama town with the unusual name of Phil Campbell. It was hit by the same deadly cluster of tornadoes that struck Tuscaloosa. That April, houses here were ripped off their foundations and turned to rubble. 26 people died. But then, something even stranger happened here, thanks to the town's unusual name. A writer in Brooklyn, New York, with the same name as the town, Phil Campbell, learned about the tornado and decided to try and help the community. Using Facebook, he reached out to Phil Campbells around the world, hoping they too would help to rebuild the town that also bears their name. Soon, Phil Campbells from Wisconsin to Scotland rallied to the call. Some even journeyed all the way here to help with the cleanup. That cleanup continues. The Phil Campbell Church of God is being rebuilt from the ground up. Back in Tuscaloosa, the University of Alabama reopened in the fall of 2011. Life here is slowly returning to normal. Inside its Bryant-Denny football stadium, the field is getting prepped for tomorrow's big game with a new coat of crimson. It was here where college football's legendary coach, Paul Bear Bryant, led the Crimson Tide to more than 232 victories and 6 national titles. NFL Hall of Famers, quarterback Joe Namath and wide receiver Don Hudson both played for the Crimson Tide. As did actor Tom Hanks, at least on screen, in his 1994 role as Forrest Gump. Tomorrow, tens of thousands of crimson-covered fans will fill these seats to cheer UA in its ritual battle against the University of Tennessee, an annual game that's known simply as the third Saturday in October. This eagerly awaited matchup is why some hardcore Alabama football fans are said to live by 2 golden rules. They never get married and try not to die on the third Saturday in October because they know that there's a good chance that the preacher won't show. But on fall Saturdays in this corner of Alabama, college football isn't the only spectacle in town. Just outside of Tuscaloosa, a team of professional burn men is about to turn 300 acres of Alabama forest into a raging inferno, just as people have been doing on this land for hundreds of years. Flying low over Alabama can provide a front row seat to a fiery spectacle that few will ever see up close. Hundreds of acres of forest land turned into a giant smoky inferno on purpose. North of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, the pine trees on this 300-acre tract were recently harvested. Now, a team of specialists is preparing to clear it for replanting with fire. It's what's called a controlled burn. Once the flames are lit, the challenge will be to control them. Shifting winds could cause neighboring lots to catch on fire. A tiny Bell 47 lifts off from the burn site, the same model used in the TV show MASH. This lightweight helicopter, first flown in 1945, has wooden blades and is armed with a tank of gelled fuel, like napalm, called Flash 21. This pilot has been lighting controlled burns across the South for more than 20 years. To get the fire started, he opens a valve so the fuel can flow. As it drips, it's ignited and then falls in a fiery stream over the burn area. Burn pilots have to work with surgeon-like precision, lighting up the fringes of the tract without burning down the neighbor's trees or sparking a wildfire, a mistake that could cost tens of thousands of dollars. Once the fire's burning at the edges, the pilot scans the perimeter, checking for flames that might be jumping across the property line. If they do, the ground team will use bulldozers and ATVs to try to get things back under control. It takes only 15 to 20 minutes to start the burn. So far, no flames have jumped this fire line. It's time to light up the rest. Flying at just 150 feet, he begins to crisscross the burn area, dripping fire in rows. Flames like these can create dangerous conditions for burn pilots, especially when there's no door to keep out smoke. It takes experience and skill to weave in and out of the fire's hot updrafts. This looks more like a scene from the film Apocalypse Now than what many might expect to find on a fall day in Alabama. Burn men know that smoke can be even more dangerous than the fire itself, and that they can be liable for accidents or health problems caused by the fire. This burn will likely continue for another 2 hours before its cinders finally die. Long before any helicopters buzzed over this state, Native Americans also used fire to turn forests into fields and clear the land for better hunting. But life for Alabama's native people wasn't just one of survival in the forest. In fact, centuries before any European set eyes on Alabama soil, this land was home to one of the largest prehistoric settlements in North America. It's a site that's known today as Moundville. It lies on the banks of the winding Black Warrior River in the western half of the state. This ancient settlement once covered more than 300 acres. Until the late 15th century, it was home to a large population known as the Mississippian Mound Builders, likely ancestors of today's Cherokee and Creek. Earthen mounds covered the site. On top were probably houses and temples. The native people who settled here grew corn and traded with other tribes and navigated throughout the state on Alabama's waterways. After it was mostly abandoned in the 15th century, Moundville was often used as a burial ground. Archaeologists have only begun to excavate this vast site, but already they've discovered skeletons, fire pits, and axes made from copper, likely ceremonial objects owned by the tribe's elites. In the air over Alabama, it's easy to stumble upon rich evidence of the state's ancient past. But it's also possible to discover the bones of a more recent industrial age. A steel crane pokes its head above trees close to the Black Warrior River. This giant excavator is called Mr. He-Man 2, named for Haman Drummond, founder of the Drummond Coal Company, which is still one of the largest surface mining companies in America. For years, this walking dragline excavator crawled across this landscape, shoveling up thousands of tons of coal. When the mine closed, it cost too much to move Mr. He-Man 2, so its engines were shut down, and it's been parked here ever since. There are many abandoned strip mine excavators across northern Alabama, standing like the skeletons of ancient creatures that died where they fell. But while the strip mines around these cranes are closed, coal in Alabama is still big business. The Black Warrior River winds its way south. From the air, it looks like a remote paradise. A cormorant scans the waters for a morning meal. But under the fish and the river itself, men and machines are busy at work, digging out one of the state's largest and most valuable deposits of coal. It's part of an area known as the Black Warrior Coal Field. There are more than 90 active mines here, including this one, the largest in the state. The reason there are no monster excavators here is because this company practices longwall mining in tunnels deep underground and under the river itself. Millions of tons of coal are extracted from Alabama's mines each year. And it was coal from this region that fueled the rise of one of America's great industrial cities, just a few miles away. This is Birmingham, Alabama, a great city of iron and steel, often called the Pittsburgh of the South. Others know Birmingham as the birthplace of country singer Emmylou Harris and the original Charlie's Angels actress Kate Jackson. Standing high over the city is a towering cast-iron statue of Vulcan, the Roman god of fire and forge. At his waist, the tools he uses to shape metals. In his right hand, a spear, one of his finished products. This statue was made to display at the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis, Missouri, as a great symbol of Birmingham, a city whose population and economy grew so rapidly in the late 19th century that it was known as Magic City. Birmingham was incorporated in 1871 by entrepreneurs who'd been eyeing the valuable mineral deposits that surrounded the town. Everything needed to make iron lay within just 30 miles, including rich veins of coal, iron ore, and limestone. In 1881, a local entrepreneur, a railroad man named Colonel James Withers Sloss, convinced investors to back his plans to manufacture iron in Birmingham. Today, his Sloss furnaces are still standing and have been made into a museum that documents Birmingham's rich industrial past. For nearly a century, the Sloss furnaces were the mainstay of Birmingham's economy, turning out hundreds of tons of high-quality iron every week. After Sloss sold his company in 1886, it went on to become one of the largest iron manufacturers in the world, all thanks to the rich resources and workers of Alabama. Birmingham's Sloss furnaces may be quiet today, but here, outside the town of Calvert, a giant new steel plant has just been fired up and promises to keep the state's industrial legacy burning bright. It's so big and so modern, it looks more like a high-end shopping mall than a steel plant. This is the new ThyssenKrupp steel mill. Opened in 2010, this German-run facility cost nearly $5 billion to build, the largest commercial investment ever in Alabama history. All the steel processed here arrives from the company's plant in Brazil as giant slabs. Then it's heated to more than 2,000 degrees and then pressed into coils of thin steel. Overhead cranes pick up and shuttle these coils with remarkable speed. Each one weighs as much as 2 African elephants. Inside the plant's towering green structures, the steel is coated with erosion-resistant zinc, the final step before it's ready to be sold. But even more remarkable is the facility itself. It was German color designer Friedrich Ernst von Garnier who gave the plant its unique look. Rather than being a hulking eyesore on Alabama's coastal plain, von Garnier wanted the plant to harmonize with the landscape and to be welcoming to its workers. Color, he insists, should be music for the eye. There's a good reason this German company chose Alabama for the site of a new steel mill. The state is home to the only Mercedes-Benz plant in the U.S., which lies just outside the city of Tuscaloosa. $1 billion worth of Mercedes-Benz cars leave this facility every year, and each one is built with high-quality steel. And Alabama's workers aren't just making German cars. Just outside Montgomery, 2,500 work here on the assembly lines inside this Hyundai plant. More than 7,000 new cars are built here every week. Alabama's auto manufacturing sector, together with its thriving steel industry, has earned the state the nickname the Detroit of the South. The ThyssenKrupp mill was built here because ships carrying steel slabs could reach the mill easily from Alabama's port city of Mobile, just 31 miles to the south. More than a century before Alabama became a state, it was part of French territory, and Mobile was the capital of Louisiana. That's why the city's downtown was home to the first Mardi Gras, long before New Orleans stole Mardi Gras glory. After cotton fever raged across Alabama, almost all of the state's cotton passed through Mobile before sailing off to mills around the world. One British visitor in 1858 wrote, "Mobile is a pleasant cotton city of some 30,000, where the people live in cotton houses and ride in cotton carriages. They buy cotton, sell cotton, think cotton, eat cotton, drink cotton, and dream cotton." Famous right fielder Hank Aaron grew up just outside the city, picking cotton as a child, before he headed off to play with the Indianapolis Clowns at the age of just 18, and went on to become one of baseball's greatest legends. These days, Mobile's modern port bustles, not with cotton, but coal. This is the largest import coal terminal in the U.S. The McDuffie terminal can process more than 15 million tons of coal a year. But the vast majority of it is not from Alabama, and not even from the United States. Coal from around the world is unloaded at McDuffie and is then sent on trains and other ships to power and steel plants across the country. This giant scooper, called a bucket wheel excavator, loads coal onto conveyor belts with amazing speed. This port can fill up a bulk carrier with 25 tons of coal every minute. All the cargo that arrives here must first travel through Mobile Bay. To protect this vital shipping route, the state of Alabama built Fort Morgan, soon after Alabama became a state. The area was later the scene of one of the most famous phrases of the Civil War. Confederate troops used the fort to defend Alabama from Union ships. On August 5, 1864, during the Battle of Mobile Bay, they fired on a Union fleet as it passed the island. One of the ships took a direct hit, but the Union Admiral, David Farragut, commanded the fleet to continue on, issuing his now famous order, "Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead." It was the last major naval battle of the Civil War and finally gave the federal government full control of all ports on the Gulf of Mexico. 5 years before this victory, on an autumn night in 1859, a ship named the Clotilda rounded the bend of this fort on its way to the port of Mobile. The U.S. had banned the international slave trade 50 years earlier, but in the cargo hold of the Clotilda that night were slaves from the West African country of Benin. Under the cover of night and fearing arrest, the captain transferred his illegal cargo onto smaller boats and ferried the African men and women to plantations upriver. They couldn't be sold as slaves, but were put to work and only freed after the Civil War. Unable to afford passage home, they started their own community here just north of Mobile, the first town in the country founded by African Americans. It's been called Africatown ever since. Right up until the 1950s, some residents here spoke the African languages of their ancestors. Today, many who live here are descendants of the men and women who originally arrived on the Clotilda. The end of the Civil War brought freedom to Alabama's slaves, but that didn't mean they were treated equally to whites under the law. And it was here in Alabama where some of America's toughest civil rights battles were fought and won. There may be no act of courage in America's civil rights history more powerful than that of the 42-year-old seamstress named Rosa Parks. On the evening of December 1st, 1955, the African-American woman boarded a public bus in Montgomery, Alabama, to take her home after work. She got on at a bus stop that was then located here at Court Square. Parks sat down in the center of the bus. At the time, due to Jim Crow laws, legalized segregation was in full swing. And at the third stop, the bus driver ordered her to give up her seat to a white man. When Parks refused, she was quickly arrested. But her actions would inspire thousands more. African Americans across Montgomery rallied to her cause and launched a boycott of the city's bus system. The man they chose to lead that boycott was a young minister named Martin Luther King Jr. His Dexter Avenue Baptist Church stood less than half a mile from the site where Parks had boarded the bus. The church became the epicenter of the Montgomery bus boycott, the first nonviolent mass protest of the civil rights movement. For more than a year, thousands of African Americans in and around Montgomery refused to ride on city buses. They got to and from work by organizing carpools instead. Some even walked from as far as 8 miles away. Since 75% of riders on the bus system at the time were black, it was a major blow to the city's economy. The boycott also spawned a wide range of demonstrations and sit-ins across the South, all in protest of segregation. Finally, in December 1956, after an appeal, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that Alabama's bus segregation was unconstitutional. The boycott had been a success. In Alabama, blacks could now legally sit wherever they wanted on city buses. Today, the Rosa Parks Library and Museum in downtown Montgomery chronicles her life and the important role she played in the civil rights movement. The year after the boycott ended, Parks, fearing she'd be the victim of racist attacks, moved to Michigan, where she lived until she died in 2005 at the age of 92. Despite the bus boycott's success, real change in Alabama and across America would take another full decade. In 1963, the state's new governor, George Wallace, stood here on the Alabama State Capitol steps and proudly declared in his inauguration speech, "Segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever." But within 2 years of this speech, Alabama was rocked by one of the biggest civil rights events in American history, and one that would destroy Wallace's dreams. It started here in the city of Selma, located on a curve in the Alabama River. In 1870, the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution had given blacks in America the right to vote. But for nearly a century, Alabama and other states had policies in place to ensure that few blacks could actually register to cast their ballots. Here in Dallas County, only about 2% of blacks of voting age could actually vote. But that was all about to change. On March 7, 1965, more than 500 African Americans gathered here in front of Selma's Brown Chapel AME Church to protest Alabama's voting rights policies. They planned to march to Montgomery, the state capital, 54 miles away. Leading that protest was Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. King led the marchers through the streets of Selma and then down Broad Street. But as they reached the Edmund Pettus Bridge, they were met by a wall of state and local police who descended on the protesters, beating them with billy clubs, bullwhips, and rubber tubing covered with barbed wire. Arms and legs were broken and skulls shattered on a terrifying day that came to be known as Bloody Sunday. The event, broadcast on national news, captivated and horrified the nation. Thousands soon poured into Selma to lend their support to the marchers. 2 weeks later, they all gathered here in the front of the church. Once again, with King at the lead, they made their way down the streets of Selma toward the Edmund Pettus Bridge. But this time, King was armed with a ruling from a federal judge that permitted the march to continue. The police could do nothing to stop them as they crossed the bridge on their way to the Capitol. From Selma, King and the marchers headed east. They followed Route 80 on foot, walking for 5 days through chilling rain and camping each night along the way. The route of this now famous march is known as the Selma to Montgomery National Historic Trail. It was on March 25, 1965, that the 25,000 marchers finally arrived in Montgomery. They gathered here at the Alabama State House to hear Martin Luther King Jr. deliver his now famous speech known as "How Long, Not Long." "They told us we wouldn't get here," King declared. "And there were those who said that we would get here only over their dead bodies. But all the world today knows that we are here, and we are standing before the forces of power in the state of Alabama, saying, we ain't gonna let nobody turn us around." King's speech and the voices of the marchers were heard in every corner of the nation. Less than 5 months later, President Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 into law, which guaranteed that blacks could register to vote just as easily as whites could. It was a defining moment in America's civil rights struggle. Alabama's not an easy state to pigeonhole. For some, it's a place of defining victories over injustice, and one rich with the history of fire and forge. Some know Alabama as the home of Crimson Tide football. But for others, this state is what lies at the end of a long annual pilgrimage here to one of NASCAR's most famous tracks, the Talladega Superspeedway. Thousands come here every year and camp out in their RVs. The air over the track is thick with the smoke from hundreds of pre-race barbecues. This is the biggest, fastest, and most competitive track on the NASCAR circuit. It was here in 2004 that driver Rusty Wallace hit 228 miles per hour during a practice run, making history as the fastest recorded time on a closed oval track. Talladega is also one of the most dangerous NASCAR speedways. Its steep banks and 48-foot wide racetrack allow up to 5 cars to race side by side, which has resulted in many crashes, so many that some believe the track is cursed. They call it the Talladega Jinx. It was on this track that actor Will Ferrell filmed the 2006 comedy Talladega Nights, crashing his race car and then sprinting on foot to the finish line to try and beat his competitor, played by comedian Sacha Baron Cohen. But northeast of the Speedway, it's a very different scene. Trees stretch as far as the eye can see. This is the Talladega National Forest, an Alabama treasure, one of the most biologically diverse woodlands in the world. It's home to nearly 30 species of trees. Poplars, dogwoods, hickories, and maples all thrive here, each turning a different, brilliant color in fall. Eastern Alabama is well known for its natural wonders. These rocks poking above the trees are a sacred site for the Cherokee, though most Cherokee were forced out of Alabama in the 1830s and sent west on the infamous Trail of Tears. Today, Cherokee Rock Village is popular with hikers and climbers who use the rocks to test their skills. Just north lies Little River Canyon. This is one of the longest rivers in the world that runs on top of a mountain plateau. This fall, the river is no more than a trickle, but when it swells in the spring, it's a kayaker's paradise. The most daring are known to ride right over Little River Falls. With so many rivers and streams in Alabama, it's not surprising that it's a fisherman's paradise. Some say that there's no better place to catch bass than in these waters. The Tennessee River crosses northern Alabama, and one of the best fishing spots on the river today is a surprising one. These fishermen are tossing their lines in the water being discharged from a nearby nuclear power plant. On cold fall days, the warm water from the plant's cooling towers attracts the fish. High over the river stands Browns Ferry Nuclear Reactor. When it was built, it was part of a vast government experiment that's still in operation today. In 1933, in the midst of the Great Depression, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed legislation to launch a mega project in the economically hard-hit areas along the Tennessee River. Part of Roosevelt's New Deal, the Tennessee Valley Authority, or TVA, was created as a giant energy agency that would be run with the efficiency of private industry. The idea was to revitalize the economy of the Tennessee River Basin by controlling and harnessing the power of the river, helping farmers fight erosion from floodwaters, and generating energy that could power new industries. The TVA also got into the business of malaria prevention and reforestation. This was one of the TVA's first projects. The already completed Wilson Hydroelectric Dam was turned over to the TVA in 1933 and then joined a series of new dams up and down the river. The flow of water in the Tennessee was ultimately so controlled by TVA projects, it acted more like a giant canal than a river, and still does today. Browns Ferry is just one of 3 nuclear plants run by the TVA on the river. Its cooling towers don't look like the spool-shaped ones used at most nuclear facilities. These are more like water coolers, running on electricity, each with 16 enormous fans. In the 1950s, power from the TVA fueled another government experiment. But this one launched humans to the moon. A rocket towers high over the Alabama city of Huntsville. It's a Saturn V, the most powerful launch vehicle ever sent into space. The story of how Huntsville came to be known as Rocket City begins at a former military base just outside of town. In 1945, at the end of World War II, the U.S. government smuggled a group of German scientists into the United States to keep them out of Russian hands. It was a program codenamed Operation Paperclip. One of those scientists, named Dr. Wernher von Braun, had worked to develop rockets for Hitler. The U.S. government wanted his expertise despite his Nazi sympathies. So starting in 1950, von Braun worked here on the grounds of the U.S. Army's Redstone Arsenal. he led a team of German and American scientists to develop a rocket that could, one day, carry humans into space. In 1958, President Eisenhower signed legislation to create NASA, which soon established the Marshall Space Center here at Redstone, NASA's first home. By the late 1960s, von Braun's team had tested 32 of their Saturn designs. Not a single one failed. Finally, in 1969, powered by a Saturn V, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin lifted off and became the first to set foot on the moon. Thanks to the Marshall Space Center, Huntsville is also home to one of the biggest concentrations of high-tech companies in the country. Siemens, Boeing, and a wide range of other aerospace-related firms whose names are less familiar to the public all call Huntsville home. Huntsville continues to live up to its nickname, Rocket City. Inside the McMorrow Missile Laboratories, scientists develop a wide range of missiles for military use. And the nearby Huntsville Airport is still a place to see amazing flying machines. Like this Boeing Dreamlifter, one of the highest capacity cargo planes in the world. The fortunes of many in Alabama are still soaring on the frontier of space exploration. But most in this state still live and work by age-old rhythms, defined by Alabama's fertile fields and the rich resources of its land and water. Resources like those in these giant ponds. Once, this was cotton country, but now this farmer is shooting pellets of food into his flooded fields. Food to feed farm-raised catfish. The catfish industry kicked off here in Alabama in the 1960s. Thousands of these fish can be raised in a single pond. And since catfish have big stomachs, they only need to be fed once a day. But when the fish come up to feed, they're easy prey for Alabama's wood storks, one of the state's endangered species. Turning fields into fish farms is one way people in Alabama have adapted to changing times. But some still continue to make a living here just as their ancestors did. The fishermen of Mobile Bay. There's an old saying in this part of the world that there are 4 seasons here: shrimp, oyster, crab, and of course, fish. When the sun sets over the bay, these men and women will head home to one of Alabama's oldest fishing ports, founded way back in 1786. The port of Bayou La Batterie is located on Alabama's tiny 53-mile coast, separated by just a narrow barrier island from the Gulf of Mexico. This quiet fishing port is known to many around the world, thanks to its starring role in the 1994 blockbuster Forrest Gump. It was here where the fictional Forrest, famously played by Tom Hanks, comes to visit his buddy Bubba and launches his own shrimping boat. During Hurricane Katrina, half the houses in Bayou La Batterie were destroyed. Losses to the fishing industry were estimated at $112 million. But still, every morning, men and women from Bayou La Batterie head out into the bay, hoping for a good day's catch. And surprisingly, the oil industry may be helping their chances. Many think of oil and gas rigs as threats to the environment, but people here in Mobile Bay know they can also create a boon. Below water, the legs of these rigs act like artificial reefs to create habitats for fish, including speckled trout. Many tourists who come to Alabama just to go fishing head right for these platforms. There's no one phrase that can sum up Alabama. Some call it the Cotton State, but there's much more to this fertile land than its white fields of gold. It's also a place of endless waters, whose banks are rich with stories that span the history of the nation. From the settlements of America's early inhabitants to the terrifying siege that carved Alabama out of virgin forest. to the brave civil rights leaders who forged a path to freedom for millions, to raging fires lit to regenerate the land. Even though scientists here helped send humans to the moon, locals like to call their southern state the heart of Dixie. Or, more simply, just sweet home, Alabama.